today I want to walk you through the process of clarifying butter. Before we actually apply heat, I wanted to look at what a pound of butter actually looks like. You can see that we have a homogenized color to it. What that's telling me is I know that besides the fat that's in the butter, there also is some milk solids, roughly about 4%. There's some water in there, about 16%, and of the fat, there's about 80%. What I need to do is to try to separate those three items out so I can actually just have the fat, which is what I'm trying to save today. So what I'm going to do is I've got 2 pounds of my butter in a 3-quart pot. The reason I'm using this size pot is it's a pretty good circumference for the amount of butter that I have in there. That way I should be able to control the heat to get the results that I want. The other thing you'll notice is that even though I've got it sitting on my burner, I haven't turned it on yet. I want to allow the butter to melt a little bit before I actually apply a lot of heat to get the water being processed out. So I'm going to go ahead and put some heat on. Lovely. The other thing you'll notice is that today I happened to grab a stainless steel pot. We also have aluminum pots that are about the same size. Since I'm not really trying to get any color on the butter, either one will work to use or serve my needs. So we're going to apply a little bit of heat. One of the things I want to do is, as I'm melting my butter, we'll see that there's going to be some steam coming off of there. That's telling me that basically I'm breaking the emulsion that I have here, with the fact that with it being a homogenized color, I've got some of the proteins of the milk that have actually been stretched out in the churning process. And for lack of a better term, those actually keep the droplets of the fat and the water separated. If you think about oil and vinegar in a cruet, if you're going to put that on your salad, that the fat actually is above the water. If we shake it a little bit, it actually gets kind of homogenized. In this next step, you'll see that I've applied heat. You'll see some foam has actually developed on top of my melted butter. If I kind of move that to the side, hopefully we're going to start to see that I've got that yellowness that is basically the butter fat that is collecting below this top layer, which happens to be a little bit of my water and my proteins that have collected on the top. There also is, hopefully, when I turn the heat off, that again, if we think about the cruet of our salad dressing, the water will separate from the fat, so the fat should rise above the water. So I should have some water, the majority of the water below the fat. Also, some of my proteins will be collecting on the bottom. At some point in time, I'm not quite ready yet, but I would like to be able to take the proteins that collect on the top and remove those so I can get that much removed so that I can see how it's coming as far as the amount of water left in there and being able to pull my fat from the other proteins. A lot of chefs will say, hey, I've broken my emulsification. I can see that I've got a little bit of steam coming out of here. Some of the proteins are separated from the fat. And they like to go ahead and start trying to remove some of these proteins from the top. And if we do it slowly, we can kind of move them and start scooping off the foam. The reason I don't like doing it at this stage is that the reason it's foamy is that there's still water in contact with the proteins that are on the top. And it's going to be very hard for me to actually get just the proteins removed without removing some of that golden yellow fat that's starting to emerge. So if I go too quickly, and if we look at the bottom of this container, I've done a little bit ahead of time, that we'll see that I've got a layer of the fat below there. Again, the idea is for me to keep that in the pot. So I'm going to apply a little bit more heat, and hopefully we can see during the next phase where my results will be even better. So I'm going to turn the heat back on. As I apply heat fairly quickly, since the water was on the bottom below the fat, the heat is going to get to the water first. It's going to find its way above the fat. The fat's a little bit heavier than what the water is. So as long as I see some steam being generated out of the pan, I know I'm probably not quite to the stage that I need to be at. Again, it depends on how much butter you're clarifying, how big your pot is, how much heat is on here as to how much time is actually going to elapse between these several steps. Between me turning the butter on and getting to the foamy stage was about 5 minutes. It'll probably be another 5 minutes depending on how much heat and again how much butter I have in the pan. So we're going to let some heat do the work for us. Again, if I was doing this in class or on the job, depending on how much heat I have applied, I could walk away with less heat on there for a little bit longer time without having to come back and look at it. Obviously, the higher the heat is, the more concerned I'm going to be to make sure I don't go too far past the next stage. We've applied heat for a few more minutes, so in this phase, the thing we're looking at is, again, if I go back to what I did earlier on that I did not get the best results I wanted, you'll notice in the pan now that basically that foam has almost evaporated out. I've almost got like flakes of the protein left. As I kind of move those to the side, we'll see that I got that lovely clarified fat that I'm looking for, that yellow fat. So I'm going to gingerly kind of move my milk solids off the top. And again, in a perfect world, I'd have every last one of these. The one thing about making clarified butter ahead of time is that if I wasn't perfect in getting all my proteins off the top or didn't get all the water out, is that as I refrigerate it, that would collect at the bottom of the container. So if I stored it in plastic or metal and released it from there, I should be able to get just the fat, which is what we're looking for. Just use a little smaller utensil. Now, the reason that we're clarifying butter is that for several of the processes that we need butter for, when we make our roux or butter and flour mixture to thicken our sauces, also for a hollandaise sauce, a lot of times we want to make sure that we have the proteins removed and the liquid that helps us with the making of the sauces. So you can see I've got most of my proteins out. The other thing I look for at this stage is that if I tilt my pot to the side, we're going to see some of the proteins that are actually on the bottom. They've kind of coagulated together, formed little balls down there. So that's telling me that basically I'm at the process that my butter has clarified. I'll remove just a little bit more of my proteins off the top, and then we're going to pour it off of here and see what it looks like. Again, one of the good things about maybe not getting quite all the water out of here is that water helps keep my temperature low, even though I've got fairly high heat on here, that I can't really get to a point that I'm going to start browning things till all that water is removed. So I'm going to show us what our clarified butter looks like. Then I also have a example of where I've gone too far. So I'm going to pour a little bit of this butter out in my plastic container. And again, I'm putting it in plastic right now just for visual purposes. But we'll see how nice and golden yellow that is, all homogenized. The fact that it's the yellow color, that's telling me that I have not applied too much heat. So that can be used for many different purposes. I'll heat one up that I did earlier that I went a little bit far with. And we'll be able to look at the bottom of the pan. Also, we'll see once I pour it out how there's a differentiation in color once I start caramelizing, or basically cooking the sugars to where they brown. Just while we're waiting for that to heat up, I might as well use the visual of looking at the color of the fat, again, compared to what it was like when it was homogenized and kind of creamy white. As I stir this, you're going to see the little brown specks. Again, kind of comparison to the one I've already done, those are the milk solids that have not been caramelized. once I get rid of all the moisture in the pan, you'll see what happens to the milk solids. When I pour out the fat again, you'll see a differentiation of color compared to the nice yellow fat that was done with a correctly clarified butter. Let's see if I can pour this out with keeping the milk solids in the bottom. Now, just by comparison, we're going to see, just with a little bit extra heat on there, how it really varies our results. When I was actually doing the caramelized version earlier in the kitchen, Chef Hadley walked by and said, "It smells nutty in here." So again, with a light sauce, potentially if I was going to make a roux that I did not want to have a brown look to, I would definitely want to make sure I stopped at the correct procedure to where I've still got the yellow butter. That's not going to add a flavor in there that I'm not really wanting in the end result. Hopefully this has helped you with the process of butter clarification. One of the things I like doing this for is because you can view this video several times, plus kind of along the process, and again, we will do this in class, or you might remember from when we did this in class, that when you see the foam or the flakes on the top, tilting the pan to see what the proteins look like in the bottom, there are a lot of visual clues along the way to make sure that we end up with the successful results.